Greetings, everybody. This is Serpentine451 here, and welcome to this very late episode of Manga Maniacs. Joining me, as always, is my good friend Jeffrey. How you doing tonight here, Jeffrey?
I'm doing fantastic. This manga is a 5 out of 5. Go read Sewayaki Kitsune. Alright, great episode. Oh, man. Talk to you next week, Tony?
No. We are not done. We are not done. We need to go
talk about Please Don't Bully Me, Nagatoro.
No, we are still talking about Senko-san, remember?
We get to talk more about Kitsune? How could anybody look at the cover of it and not immediately read it? I feel like that's going to be the whole episode. It's just like, go look at the cover, and then you'll want to read it, and then you'll read it, and you're like, yep, that was a 5 out of 5. I am now deeply depressed because I do not have a Fox Girl waifu of my own.
Well, here's the thing. Let's just get into it. Spoiler-free review. Since you want to give it 5 out of 5, why don't you describe the whole premise of this, well, admittedly wonderful manga, but I wouldn't say it's on the same tier as you're putting it.
So the whole premise of this manga can basically be explained in 3 panels of the author that the author gives at the end of one of the chapters, where he says, "I'm so overworked. I just want a fox girl to pamper me. Why isn't there a manga about a fox girl pampering people? I have to draw a fox girl manga pampering people, where she pampers people." And that's it. That's the whole manga. Every manga needs payoff moments in order to make all the build-up and struggling worth it. This is 100% payoff, because you know what? Sometimes manga is like you gotta eat your unsalted broccoli in order to get your dessert. And sometimes life is unsalted broccoli. And this is life's dessert. This is a great manga. 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5. I can't even think about giving it any less. I don't know. Plus, my scale is different than yours. So how about you, Tony? How did you feel about this manga?
Well, I do agree that it's actually very wholesome. It's very fluffy. Very, very fluffy. I enjoy the fluffy, makes your heart feel like it's chocolate cake. But sometimes diabetes can kill, and I think this is cuteness overload, and I think its anime adaptation, which is coming, by the way, is going to be also cuteness overload, and it will make me fat. So there's only so much. I mean, I enjoy happiness, pure, unadulterated happiness, as much as the next individual. But sometimes it can be too much. So it's good. It's very good. But I would say it's at least a 3 out of 5 for me.
Oh, wow. 3 out of 5? Honestly, like, I think this one is a little bit more difficult to rate subjectively because, you know, what is it being compared to? Because it's not trying to do the stuff that other manga is trying to do. It's just trying to be light and fluffy. It really feels like the ultimate message. You need to live it.
And admittedly, that's all it is to me. It's something that's meant to be light and fluffy. I don't know. I want something. Well, there are moments where there is like raw emotion, and you feel for Senko and our protagonist's relationship at a lot of times, but it's mostly centered around, it's like these more intriguing, more substantial and emotionally grounded moments are mostly overlooked by just, oh, cute fox girl wants to make sure you're well taken care of for 31 chapters.
I mean, I can't imagine a better premise. But I get what you're saying. You want basically more. I think that
this is good. This is quality fluffiness.
It is.
And I mean, I want to feel a much broader. I want to feel a connection with the characters more than just say, oh, cute fox girls want to do adorable things like take care of an individual. And I think that just feels rather, sure, it's nice, but in small doses. It feels flat, one-dimensional.
See, I'm gonna have to disagree with you there, like, because essentially manga isn't necessarily like a full course meal because you're enjoying chapters of one thing while enjoying chapters of another thing. So, yeah, Kitsune is like 100% sweet chocolate cake, but at the same time, you know, you can have so much else going on in your life that like can sort of balance that out. It could be your personal life, it could be other manga you read. If you read this immediately after something like Berserk, it's gonna be a whole different experience, and it won't necessarily be a bad one or a worse one. You know what I mean?
Well, what I need after something that's emotionally breaking, I watch garbage anime. Because I need something to laugh at. I don't need diabetes.
I need diabetes sometimes. I want a fox girl to pamper me.
I mean,
I
there's
don't want to
nothing
work a day-one
wrong
job.
with a fox girl taking care of you.
Yeah.
Don't get that twisted, okay? But I'm just saying, with a premise like this, sure, something light and fluffy is good to have, but if I want to read something for 31 chapters, I want to feel connected to these characters.
You don't
Then
feel
the
connected to the main
overarching
character?
premise of it.
You don't feel connected to his endless suffering and pain?
I feel a connection where I live his life, where I am tired of just the throes of life every day. And that's a
You
good
need a
bit of
fluffy bed.
relatability, but I want to feel more than that relatability. I want to know the inner workings of a character more so than relating to the
See what
character. I mean,
Hotel
relating to
looks
the
like without
character,
the fluff? That's horrible. You're a monster.
I am not a monster. I'm just someone that wants to appreciate characters in a story rather than the premise of the story itself.
I suppose. But at the same time, like, I kind of feel like if you look back on some of the other stories, like Border School Juliet, like, in those cases, the premise of the story is literally all every story is. It's just here's a harem manga with two characters named after uh, Romeo and Juliet, and half the school hates the other half. So I feel like in this case, like it's difficult to like apply anything here because there's no weak points for us to target and say this is why it loses a point. Like you can't like point to the art and say, oh well, the art's not as good as what the author's trying to do with it, you know? Because like all these characters are incredibly expressive and can
I mean,
convey
yeah, the
really well.
characters in the art are incredibly expressive. Like Shiro when she's actually eating something, because that fox girl always has food in her mouth, and her faces of like pure joy and glee, they're great. They're adorable. But I just feel like after reading chapters in succession, I'm like, I'm just seeing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, maybe I would feel the same way if it got to like 60 or something. But at the same time, with only 15 pages per chapter and only 30 chapters of content, it's still like only, what is that, 30 times 15? That's 450 pages. That's pretty minuscule compared to some manga. Compared to like, golly gee, compared to Shield Hero or Boarding School Juliet, which are like 1,000 plus. I think this one like sort of it's setting out on an idea, a very singular idea, and then it nails it in that category. Like if a musician decided instead of writing a symphony, he would just write a little catchy melody, and then can you compare that little catchy melody to a symphony?
I mean,
You use the same set of standards.
no, not in the grand scheme of things, but in a much broader sense, it's just my personal feeling on it. I mean, sure, light and fluffiness is fine every once in a while, and it was a good, pleasant read. It actually was very soothing to read. That's what I'm trying to say is, I don't know, I wanted something more out of these characters to I want more expansiveness, so to speak, in their characterizations. than just their
Them
one
being
note
happy.
character traits.
I
I'm saying,
don't feel like they're one note. I feel like all the characters have at least some depth, with the main character
I
feeling
mean,
more.
Senko and our lead,
Yeah,
they
Seth.
have depth of character to them. Yeah, those are the only two characters that have a little bit more depth to them, in my honest opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I like these two characters. I just want to kind of explore more of their thought processes. And sure, the other characters too. I want to see how they tick individually. I mean, we got a little of that in the neighbor who's trying to be a mangaka while going to university. We had a chapter focused on kind of her mindset on things. And when she was introduced and how she was at first fairly hostile, but then when Senko gave her food, it made her a much more likable character. There was a progression in a way of exploring the depth of characterization.
So here's an interesting point. So essentially, every manga has its build up to deliver on its payoff. Do you feel like this manga, which is just concentrated high quality payoff, actually sort of weakens other manga by proxy, because it's delivering on what other manga are like withholding from you? So like if I were to read Border School Juliet immediately after this, Border School Juliet just seems even worse by comparison, because the payoff that Border School Juliet delivers with its fluffy moments is not only of lower quality, but also I have to sit through parts I don't enjoy to get that, whereas I could just go right over to Kitsune and get hype.
But therein lies a bit of a problem here when you really think about it. We live in a society where instant gratification is keen. And I think waiting patiently to get to a satisfying moment in a manga is more of an ideal rather than having that bit of instant gratification.
True, but at the same time, Kitsune isn't like delivering on instant gratification necessarily. I would argue that it's just gratification. That's its whole premise.
I think gratification for its sake is a bit of a hindrance. I mean, for the type of manga that it is, yeah, sure, it's perfectly fine and serviceable, but you can't have a manga like this all the time, in my honest opinion.
True, but at the same time, like that only really applies if like the manga that you're waiting for has a bigger or better sense of payoff or reward. And in some manga cases, that just isn't the case. There are some isekai that will make you sit through endless droves of exposition and then deliver on like, oh, and here's a panty shot. Whereas this one delivers much higher quality stuff at a much faster rate. You could make an argument that like it's harder to go back to old Doctor Who shows because they take a lot longer to get to their payoff moments.
But there are people that really enjoy the slow burn of most stories rather than, boom, the story can be done in a matter of minutes.
I wonder why that is. I wonder what necessarily attaches itself to that area, or if they just like different aspects, you know? Is it a matter of this payoff is worse, but I like the wait, or is it just that the payoff sensations are different, you know?
I think with most people, it's, there's this saying, it's not the destination, but their journey that's the most satisfying. And I think that's when it comes to a lot of people. I would kind of include myself in some situations, depending on the manga, that the journey and the intrigue of getting to the destination is more fulfilling and more of a rush than actually knowing what that destination is.
Yeah.
But when you're okay, let me give you an example. There's a manga that I'm reading called Domestic Girlfriend. And I wait on bated breath to know what's going on next in that story, because chapters can be very sporadic. Love and Lies is a very similar situation for me, because I really want to know what's going on, but with the most recent chapters, it's nothing that I'm too keen on, but I find it very engaging because it's a character that we rarely get to see the point of view of most of the time. but that's besides the point. I am more invested in the story, learning more as it goes along than where it may inevitably end up. Because I'm intrigued, and that's the more entertaining part in those stories, in my honest opinion. But with Senko-san, I feel like we get from point A to point B with very little in between them. And I think that is fairly shallow. I mean, sure, it's fine for what it is. You have chapters where, oh, Senko wants to make sure that our lead, I'm forgetting his name,
I just call him Sad Sack.
Yeah, I might as well refer to that. Sad Sack is going to be taking a bath because Senko got his bath ready, and all she wants to do is wash his back, which that's all that happens, essentially. And there's... I mean, this is supposed to be a light and fluffy story that doesn't have much depth, I know, but it's just playing that we know where the journey is going to lead, and sometimes that's rather stale.
Yeah. I think another thing that affects it for me is, personally, I really hate anything where it feels like I'm being manipulated for like a financial reason. And so for a lot of stories, like those dramatic, long-running arcs that will lead to an eventual payoff sort of feel like I'm being tugged along by a chain, you know? Whereas this one, it's like, I could stop reading at any time because the author isn't trying to use like any tricks to keep me hooked in, like cliffhangers or anything like that. Except I would argue in this latest chapter, where it seems like things could potentially get more dramatic. They sort of ended on a what's going on kind of moment, you know?
Yeah, and that's one thing that's intriguing, but overall, what I'm trying to say here, Jeffrey, this isn't a bad manga. It's good. But just on my personal scaling of things and my level of intrigue, it's still going to be a 3 out of 5 for me.
Right. But yeah, we have different scales. Mine is like, how worth your time is this if you've got free time? And this is a really unique experience. But I'm not really sure I totally understand like how your scale works. Like, what's it compared to? What's a 1 out of 5 here? What are the rules, you know? Maybe this is the episode to expound on that.
Well,
could you give me a different...
that I can say a little bit about my scaling is that it's not like in a way it's a little bit like your scale, but it's more suited to how I kind of got out of the experience. It's more like, how much enjoyment did I get out of this manga throughout the course of me reading it?
Oh, interesting. Could you define what the difference is for you between a 1 and a 1.5 then? Because those are like the smallest increments, but they're also some of the most important for understanding how the rules work.
I mean, okay. Sure, this may not be a manga per se, but I will give an example of what a 1 out of 5 for me in terms of an anime would be. If it consistently does things to annoy me, yet I still continue to watch it because I just want to see how horrible it can be. And usually it still surprises me. Camper is one of those anime that continuously, to this day, annoys me.
Yuzu Camp?
No, Camper.
Ah.
It consistently annoys me. To this day. And it's because, well, its premise is kind of fun, but some characters are inherently stupid. The plot itself is, well, nothing to really cry home about. I mean, it's sort of just your basic harem anime, which I've seen my fair share, but the whole gimmick of this one is our lead turns into a girl and has to fight other girls that transform into these warrior girls called campers.
Okay, so as from what I understand, basically, you finish the series and you're like, how much of a good time did I have overall? And then you assign it a rating based on that. And a 1 out of 5 is like, I was consistently annoyed, and
Yeah,
the
that's
show
pretty
almost
much
felt
it.
like it didn't let me watch. So what's a 1.5 then?
Okay, well, it's more like an upgrade where I find one character that kept me like, okay, I can hate the rest of this utter garbage, but I have this one character that I can really connect with. And
Right.
that's a bit of the silver lining.
So so it isn't like just pure enjoyment factor out of it. It's like, how hooked am I on this subject as well? So it's a combination of how like engaged you are during the time and how you feel when you finish it.
Yep, pretty much.
Okay, so that makes sense because this manga doesn't really feel like it hooks you, you know? It just sort of is there. It's like a lovely painting that you stare at, and then you can come back and stare at it, but it's not like a movie where it's like, what will happen to John Shootegeier? It,
Nah, that's essentially it, yeah.
um, but yeah, so that's our ratings. One last thing I thought was actually really interesting, aside from the way the artist does faces, which is very expressive. I can't get over that. Seeing these characters cry in these very tiny panels is much more effective for me personally than almost any other style of tear drawing I've ever seen. He's definitely very talented. Um, but the other element that really interested me was kind of almost how you've got this non-human race that is treated differently from non-human races in other stories. Like if you look at like just about any other interpretation of elves or long-lived beings, they don't really ever get the sense that like the Kitsune here do, where it introduces this whole, there are species of people that like to take humans as pets and pamper them until they pass away from old age. That's really interesting to me because like I haven't seen that before, and that's pretty cool as compared to just generic isekai elves again. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah. And I like the ideas presented in here about how the kitsune work in this manga. And plus, when we're actually in the kitsune world and we see Suzu, I thought that was admittedly very funny. Where she's trying to find Senko and she has this image of what Senko is, where she's actually right next to the person she's trying to search for. Oh, too funny. I actually like that.
Yeah, I would definitely say that the series focuses on being compact. You know, it's very minimalist in terms of characters. It's very minimalist in terms of size, in terms of the art direction, and they get away with doing a lot with very little.
Yeah,
If that
and
makes
that's one of the good points that I can say about this manga. It's very compact. It basically tells what the kinds of stories it needs to tell in its individual chapters, and that's perfectly fine and serviceable. And I also like a lot of the characters in this story. For even though some of them don't have the depth I want them to have, but they're still good characters in their own way. Like Shiro, as a character, she's nothing more than a little glutton that pretty much wants to be treated like she's top tier.
I wouldn't say she's top tier. I would say Sora, the supervisor. That's a top tier.
Oh yeah, that Sora is definitely top tier. But what I'm saying is that Shiro, she wants to be called Shiro-sama. He wants people to basically view her as the pinnacle of a kitsune because she has pure white fur.
Yeah. So it kind of feels like we're like treading on repeated territory, just because there isn't so much of the manga to talk about. Uh, it's very compact, and it just sort of delivers on its premise first, and then continues to consistently keep delivering on it over and over. You know what I mean?
Yep, definitely. And we can keep this episode fairly short here by just
Ow! I'm a fox.
No.
You'll realize one day I'm hilarious. You'll wake up one night and just in a fit of laughter as you realize, oh my god, that was the funniest thing I've ever heard. That's gonna happen to you. And then you're gonna call me, and then I'm gonna be like, dude, I told you so. Also, why are you calling me at 3 in the morning?
Well, that would be more likely. That would more likely happen when I'm drunk.
If you say so. Anyways, you were saying?
So let's get to our little wrap up here. But before then, do we want to talk about the characters?
Not necessarily. I feel like we went over all of them already. The otaku who just sort of is an otaku and presents a little bit of a challenge before being sort of just friended and joins the roster for a little while. All of them have their little moments, but I'd argue that essentially, once you know the premise, the characterization of the individuals doesn't really extend beyond what we've already talked about, you know? We already talked
Fair
about
enough.
the nature of the kitsune, which is pretty much Senko's whole arc. And sad sack is a sad sack. That's the thing.
Yeah, true. So back to our ratings. It's still going to be a 3 out of 5 for me.
I'm glad we both agree that it's a 5 out of 5.
It is still 3.
Plus 2.
Nope, still 3.
Okay. We can agree to disagree. You can take the stance that this is an okay and pretty good one, and I will take the stance that you are wrong. And that it's amusing. I'm just kidding. Anyways, so. Take us away.
Okay, so join us next time when we talk about another manga. Have we decided what we were going to talk about?
No, I think it's your turn to pick. You were saying that episode 10 should be My Hero Academia. But to counter out this diabetes of a series, I imagine you'll have something very dark, and I'll have many things to say about that.
Actually, I may have something in mind that may be different from your sensibilities. It's
You will
not.
tell this to me while the camera is still live?
No, not yet here. But I will say that join us next time for something that might be fairly long, but not too terribly long. Also,
One Piece.
no.
It's One Piece, folks. Join us next time as we discuss the entirety of One Piece in color.
Before I kill myself. But this episode is brought to you by Fox Girls. Fox Girls. They make you feel like you're walking on air.